everybody. I'm Ron Waxman. This is the COVID-19 series on CRT Online, and today I'm having a guest, Dr. Sunil Raul, and he's going to come to us as the editor-in-chief of Circ Intervention. Welcome, Sunil.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me.
And I'm sure as this is a very unique time for every one of us, it's also impacting journals and publications in the journals. So maybe you can share with us what have you been noticing since this pandemic has started? What changed with respect to Circ Intervention and anything that related to publications?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I think it is important to talk about this. I've noticed a couple of things. So I think that there's been, the most palpable change has been the volume of submissions to our journal has gone way up. And I think some of that is reflective of the fact that there is a tremendous number of patients coming in with COVID-19 or suspected COVID-19 and some cardiovascular manifestations. But probably the more logical explanation is that for many people, they are working from home now. They're not going into the hospital. They're doing telehealth. And so it leaves them with a tremendous amount of time on their hands to catch up with the work that they should have been doing all along, which is great. We want to see these manuscripts coming in. The second thing that we've noticed is that the number of manuscripts on coronavirus and COVID-19 cardiovascular manifestations has obviously gone up. And I think in a situation where many of us are wondering and trying to learn more about the disease, this is a really important thing. The other thing that we've noticed is that the number of papers on how medical practice or policies or protocols have changed in the era of the pandemic have also increased. And these are great because they do provide for some templates for other folks who are wondering how to change their cath scheduling, how to restart doing elective procedures, to try and learn from each other. And the final thing that I think many of us are seeing is that the number of papers going into the preprint servers is also increasing. And that obviously is a double-edged sword. These are not necessarily peer-reviewed publications, but they're pre-peer review being posted to medRxiv, for example, and allowing the public to take a look at them and hopefully providing some kind of public peer review before they get submitted. Again, that's a little bit of a double-edged sword because sometimes the media can pick up on those things and run with it and talk about them as if they've been vetted scientifically, and really they haven't yet.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed the same thing, and I'd like to focus on the COVID-19 submissions first, and then we can talk in general, which is a little bit bothering me because, again, as you've seen, and this is probably unprecedented, even the New England Journal of Medicine published a small series of patients, no control group. Again, all of them are peer review, but again, this has never happened before, as far as I recall, that you can send a series of 68 patients and no control group, and just because it's new, it's already published. And then, but it's not only the New England, it's like you're getting a lot of information. It's very hard to vet all of those. There is a rush to publication. I'm sure everybody wants to do expedite, and it may hurt the integrity and the acuity of the actual science, and also subjected to a lot of, as you said, it's going to be picked by the media, especially if it's already in print or going to be after the review process. So how, as an editor, you vetting on this part? On the one hand, you want to be also part of this, taking part of publishing papers in the topic, on the and not to be the last one. You want to be the lead, and Circ Intervention is one of the leading journals, especially for interventional cardiology. The second thing is, how do you vet that the quality is still there and you're not going to be regret on all those papers that if someone's going to look backward, they were basically not credible?
I think you're bringing up probably the most important aspect of this as it relates to scientific publishing. I think the New England Journal editors were recently on a podcast or something where they talked about how they balanced this. And they elected, it sounds like, to err on the side of having perhaps a little bit of a broader net. My personal view, and this is my own personal opinion, is that it's now where we really have to adhere to our scientific rigor and scientific standards, because there's so much information coming. And quite frankly, because we know very little about this disease, or we're learning so quickly and things are changing on a daily basis, there's a tremendous amount of fear about the disease. And it's particularly in those kinds of settings where we have to maintain our scientific standards. That's the stance that we've taken. And so we do get a lot of papers on coronavirus and COVID-19, many of which are not scientifically very rigorous, and we have elected not to publish those. That may mean that we have fewer publications related to COVID-19 relative to other journals, but in our view, it's really more important to maintain the scientific standards than it is to simply put information out there that may either be proven to be untrue in a future publication. For example, if you have no control group and you potentially talk about some treatment that may be beneficial, no matter how nuanced you make the language, people are headline readers, or in our field, I guess they're abstract readers, and they may take away a message that some treatment may be effective, while we await a randomized trial, which is going to be published in a couple of months, showing that in fact the treatment was not beneficial or maybe even harmful. I think that you've underscored, I think, the biggest challenge for us as publishers. And again, what we've done is to really try and adhere as much as we can to scientific rigor, rather than just trying to get anything that's out there.
One question, maybe a brief one. In your opinion, this is going to help to the impact factor of the journals in terms of citation, or actually will dilute that? Because if journals picking up a lot of those papers, some of them are kind of series of case reports. Obviously, they won't be able to cite everything. And,
right.
Journals in the past were focusing on selecting papers so their impact factor will maintain or rise. So what is your thoughts about those papers that are being published all over with regards to citation and impact factor?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think it's an important one. And I will say that Joe Hill, who's the editor-in-chief of Circulation, has always said that for the Circulation family of journals, it's less about impact factor than it is about impact. And I think we try to adhere to that. Now, having said that, impact factor is the one thing that all of us who edit journals love to hate. To me, it's a lot like the U.S. News and World Report. If your impact factor goes down, you talk about it as a flawed factor, but if it goes up, then you shout it from every rooftop. So it is something that we have to keep in mind. I think that maybe it's a little less of an impact, or pun intended, right now, because again, the impact factor is a 2-year impact factor. And I would be shocked and surprised if any of these COVID-19 papers are heavily referenced, after 6 months from now. I just don't think they're going to be. But that's okay, because I think that if it's really important information that has to be disseminated, and it will have some kind of an impact, whether it's on clinical care or on protocols or policies, it's still important to publish those. But trying to focus on the impact factor for these papers, or quite frankly, any other paper, is really, I think, sort of a flawed way to approach editing a journal.
Another issue that I've been noticed is one of those submitters of papers to a very prominent journal. I won't mention the name, but we basically got an answer. Guys, we are flooded with over 100 papers on COVID-19. It's going to take us a while to even get into your paper. So if you really want to get a shot into that, even for the review process, why don't you go to another journal? I mean, just that, I was stunned, like 100 papers for submission, and they have to vet what will be reviewed and what will not be reviewed. So that comes to the issue of how do you handle that? You mentioned two things. Hey, you have the COVID-19 papers, a huge influx of those, and then people have more time to write, so they're submitting. So the submission rate overall has been probably doubled and tripled. And I see it also in my own small journal significantly. So you have your staff. I'm sure it's not been increased. So how do you handle the flow right now and deciding which one is going to be first? And do you have this issue which flooded with COVID-19 that put all the manuscript to stay online after you vetted the COVID-19 papers?
Yeah, it's an important issue. I mean, the workload has significantly increased. That is COVID-19 or coronavirus. We have a great staff, we have a great team, and I have been leaning on our team of associate editors quite a bit, because I read every paper that comes through, and I then decide whether it's should be rejected without review so that the authors have a chance to submit elsewhere, or if it goes to an associate editor. And for a large proportion of these, I have been leaning on my associate editors to tell me. I say, hey, listen, what do you think about this? Here's what the authors have done. Can you take a look and tell me if you think that this should be sent out for review? And I've been doing that quite a bit more than I have in the past, because just purely because of the volume. And again, I'm not in a place that is a COVID-19 hotspot right now. And I think trying to apply my experience with COVID-19 to a paper that's coming from a real hotspot is a little bit flawed. And so that's why I've been leaning on our team to do that. And I'm sure you do the same thing. It's just, you don't want to be put in a position where you're the one who makes the decision and it ends up being the wrong decision. I think as editors, that's what keeps us up at night. And if you can get a team of people to take a look at something and decide, is this something that we should even send out for review, or should we just go ahead and let these authors submit somewhere else? That's a really valuable decision, I think, for the authors.
Yeah, that's a same experience that we have. And maybe one more issue, which is again, transformation of the field. I think CRT, unfortunately, CRT 2020 probably was the last meeting for the year of, this coming year. I mean, maybe there will be some other meeting towards the last quarter of the year, but that actually takes a lot of the breadth of late-breaking trials, publishing in journals, which actually help to the journals. But on the other hand, because you don't have more meeting, or you don't have the meeting, you turn to look more perhaps on what's written in the journals as a reference of credibility. Because if you had to go, so ACC had their virtual meeting, which was great. But from then on, what do you do without late-breaking trials? I mean, so how do you feel that this is going to impact on journals? Is that going to be making people reading more the journals? I mean, how are you going to get, there is some synergism between the late-breaking trial presented in the national meeting and publication in top journals. So what's your thoughts about this new dynamics right now?
Yeah, but first of all, let me congratulate you publicly on CRT 2020. I mean, just fantastic meeting. It gets better every year. And I unfortunately, I think you may be right, at least for the near future. It's probably going to be the last in-person meeting we're going to see for a while. And having said that, I do agree with you. I think we're all going to have to get used to a different way of learning and a different way of consuming information. The ACC virtual meeting really they did a terrific job. And I think what I noticed was that the international participation seemed to be quite a bit higher because it saved the physicians and the other ancillary healthcare providers the expense of having to fly to the United States and a hotel room and so forth. So we're obviously dealing with this with SCAI and trying to figure out how to put on a good virtual meeting so that people can get the information. I do think it's going to be advantageous for the journals, at least in the short term. If we can get more eyes to actually look at the journals and read the methods and understand the nuances of these trials rather than trying to get sound bites, that's a good thing. I think it's going to be temporary. There are just so many competing ways of getting information that to try and think that the journals are going to be reigning supreme again, it's probably a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah, well, that's I think on the journals to keep the high quality and integrity and to differentiate themselves with all the social media publications that are like a burst of information that really not validated and just moving like a pendulum from one small study to another study. So if you really want to know the truth, you have to rely on credible sources. And if the journals will keep themselves to those high standards, I think they will gain much more credibility. So I'll give you my thoughts, and I wonder if you feel the same, that this COVID-19 pandemic, I think from the journal perspective, it's a good thing. You have more papers coming in, more time to read, probably short time to review because the reviewers doesn't have much other activities. So I found out that they actually are more responsive in reviewing and returning the review back. And then you have less competition on the media with national meetings to get the information, the important information or the high quality information to be disseminated. And I think that, yes, the pandemic, not going to be for a long period of time. We have to think about the post-pandemic, but it's a great opportunity for journalists actually to shine and to play again the role like in the old days when, before both of us went to med school or we were in med school, that journals had in the past.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the silver lining to this, it's really a horrible situation we're all in. And obviously, I think both of us send our thoughts to the folks that are on the front lines. But I think the silver lining to this is that hopefully it will make people more discriminate consumers of scientific information. and being able to separate the signal from the noise, which is really what the journals have been trying to do. And unfortunately, it's been a little bit of a losing battle, I think, over the last few years, as you said, with all of this information coming out on social media. So maybe one of the positive things that can come out of this is a refocus on what's real information and what really is fake news.
Maybe my final question to you, are you planning on CERC intervention to have any special issue, special focus, or special initiative which is related to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I'll say we do have a special issue on PAD. The deadline for submission is May 1st, coming up this week. We're not planning on having a special issue related to COVID-19 for a couple of reasons. One is that Circulation, the big journal, is doing that. So we want to make sure we encourage submissions to that. And the second thing is that oftentimes, as you know, the actual process for review and revising and resubmitting and accepting can be quite prolonged. So a COVID-19 issue for us, a smaller journal, would be sometime in the fall and winter. And while that may still provide some valuable information, the reality is I think the clinicians need the information now. And larger journals like Circulation have a much faster way of getting this information out there. So I would encourage people to submit to that particular special issue.
Good. Okay, with that, I think we'll conclude our discussion for today. Again, I'd like to congratulate you on a fantastic job that you do with the journal and keep the high level and integrity. And I encourage everybody to continue to submit to your journal. And I hope you'll be able to take care of this surge in manuscripts and keep up the quality. So congratulations, Sunil, and stay healthy and strong, and hopefully to see you in person soon.
Thanks so much, Ron. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.